Hey Internet, welcome back. So in the last video we talked a little bit about Quincy Larson, and we used sort of the analogy of LTC, learning to code, is a bit like exercise or sports or fitness. And we discussed briefly sort of the idea of use it or lose it, right? You're developing a muscle, a group of muscles, and if you don't use those muscles, i.e., learning to code and the sort of the skills that you develop in LTC, and you don't use them and practice them, you may sort of get out of shape, and that was that. So in this video, we want to discuss the second of three ways that we sort of believe, again, there's some interesting or potentially interesting parallels between LTC, learning to code, and fitness or exercise or sports or whatever. So today we actually want to sort of dig down into an experience that I've had. Might be different or not relevant to you at all, but we still sort of wanted to talk about it and see if it resonates at all with the community. And so the second idea of how LTC is similar to exercise, staying fit, sports, whatever, is just this idea that, and I may be referring to my screen because I've taken a couple notes trying to make these videos a little more coherent sometimes, or less roundabout. But the idea, I guess, is for me, is like, people have different types of memory. People have different learning styles. And just bear with me for a moment, but hopefully I'll get back to sports or fitness. But there's this idea, I think it's like Bloom's taxonomy, or there's different sort of psychological or psychology terms for the different forms of learning. But one of them sort of categorizes the different types of learning. People can be visual learners, as in they like need to see. There could be auditory learners, as in like you need to hear something before you retain it or own it. There's kinesthetic learners who like sort of learn through movement, and then there are verbal learners, so they like need to say stuff in order to learn. And so this to me is interesting, just in that like I know some people are really good dancers, right? There's a variety of different reasons why you might be a good dancer, but depending on the type of dance, one of the characteristics or sort of skills that you might have is the ability to not only know what physical movements you might need to be, right? Like say we're doing salsa, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, sidestep, 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 basic, and roundabout. Anyway, sorry, that was potentially very distracting. But anyway, not only do you sort of need to know what steps you have to do in this dance, but you also need to know how your body would move in order to do these steps. And so I guess in my head, that's like, maybe you need to be able to like visualize the specific steps, and you need to get your body to do it, which means that for me, my learning style is not super conducive to that, at least thus far in life. So like, I find formal dances like the waltz, the rumba, all these different things very stressful because I don't remember what I'm supposed to do. And then I'm a male, so I'm supposed to lead. And that causes a lot of stress, which means it's harder to remember. Anyway, I guess for me, the thing that I'm trying to say is like, it's interesting sort of to know that some people with the learning styles or gifts that they're given in life, they can see things once, hear things once, do things once, or say things once, and then it's like, it's registered, right? And maybe that's more a question of memory, visual, auditory, kinesthetic memory, or whatever, rather than those specific learning types. But for me, like whatever sort of transform or medium, there's translation, or we're trying to like learn something, I generally need to do it 2 to 4 times before I like own something mentally. And this, I think, actually translates very well for LTC, learning to code. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think for me, it's like super interesting how in a classroom setting again, or in a semi-formal classroom setting in my coding bootcamp, there are a variety of learners. Some of the learners are super visual. They'll just see a line of code and they'll register it, encode it. They'll register it in their head and they'll like it's good to go. Other people I've noticed have to like say it out loud, which makes me suspect that they're an auditory learner. And then other people like actually have to like write physical notes rather than tap it on a keyboard or say it or hear it, right? And so there are these sort of variety of learners, and then there's sort of a variety or variance within the sort of the frequency that people have to go through these individual exercises, whether it be reading, writing, doing, or hearing or whatever. And for me, like I just know from previous experience, or I suspect projecting forward, that I will need. Oh man. Okay. This is like, hold on. Sorry. So what happened is, I guess, since I'm on the Apple ecosystem, my watch is connected to my phone phone's connected to my computer, and my computer is connected to my headphones, and then I said something which activated Apple Music, which was playing this like very violent sounding, loud, at maximum volume German band that Apple thinks I should listen to. Anyway, so that was that little detour. But back to the point, I know from my notes, but also from my experience, that I have to do something like 2 to 3 times, right? Like, so if I'm learning something like conditional logic, like if statements, so in Ruby it's like if, elif, and so on and so forth, or in JavaScript it's like if, else if, and so on and so forth. I know that I need to repeat that a couple times, and I found that like actually typing it for me is more useful than just like writing it out by hand. So like I need to like be in the environment that I'm going to be in, which for me is like the physical keyboard. And I need to type that, but not only type it once, but several times in order for me to start like moving from passive to active knowledge of like owning that information or process. And I like just find, looking at my notes, I find that that's like pretty interesting, in that like when I go through the process of like learning a new sport or learning a new activity or dance, like I need to repeat it several times. And it can be really frustrating when other people seem to get it like right away, and I don't. But that's sort of irrelevant in most contexts, right? Because like it's not about how quickly they learn it, it's more about like a question of how quickly I learn it or whether or not I'll learn it at all, right? So for me, LTC, learning to code, is similar in sports in that both there are sort of a variety of ways in which people learn, physical, visual, auditory, so on and so forth. And then there's also this sort of sub-question of like how many times do you need to do something or be exposed to something before it starts to translate from the passive to the active knowledge spectrum. And I just like find that's like pretty interesting. So in this video we talked about the different types of learners and sort of how sports in some ways is like LTC, learning to code, in that you may sort of want to apply different learning styles, like you would for sports, right? Like so if you're learning baseball, like some people like need an auditory description of how baseball works in order to get it. Some people need to like actually swing a bat and like throw a pitch and catch a catch or whatever. Other people need to like to hear it or see it or whatever. So that's interesting. A similar analogy is like there's nothing like practice, right? So for a fair amount of people, I think like the actual fact of like playing a sport or doing a physical activity is sort of irreplaceable. Like most people, like you could describe how to be a quarterback, but if you're like don't have experience actually playing American football and being a quarterback, like it might be kind of tough or difficult like when you actually get on the field. Same with like being a goalkeeper or whatever. Like I think there's some level that it's like actually just the physical activity, the kinesthetic translation of experience of being a goalie or a goalkeeper in sort of like traditional soccer in traditional football. And I think it's like the same, at least for me, for LTC learning to code. So that means like actually writing code on a computer is super, super valuable. So that's what we talked about or tried to talk about in this video. There was a brief interlude while I unintentionally activated Siri and started playing relatively large or violent German music. I'll try to link the song that I was activating in the notes section of this video, so you can check it out if you want. But comments, suggestions, improvements, feedback, all of this, as always, is welcome, though not required. I think at some point we're supposed to tell people if they want to subscribe to our channel, they can't. So you definitely have that option, but no optionalization. Obligation is what I was going for, but with option. Anyway, cool. So we're gonna go on with our day. You go on with yours, and maybe I'll see you later. Give me a call. Yeah. Okay. That was potentially kind of weird, so we're just gonna go instead, and hope you have a good one. Bye.